Gentlemen, I love long-form stories. I love having tons of arcs, characters, and ideas to dig into. I like drawing points of comparison and contrast between characters who never even meet. Seeing foreshadowing only pay off after a decade or more of serialization time arouses me in ways I cannot totally comprehend. Where a movie or novel can be impeccably dense in getting across their core idea or point, long-form stories are more sprawling, containing a bunch of ideas it's able to tackle in different ways or layer with other ideas, both allowing different people to approach them and have their own takeaways through different means. What I want to discuss in this video is a way to write these kind of long stories. Not the way. Neither of them does it perfectly when viewed holistically, nor would I want to see all stories be so homogeneous. But well, I noticed it, and it's something I find interesting. It's something that, if more people keep this kind of structure in mind, can perhaps be applied to other stories to see more ways to utilize the structure and what it can accomplish. To do so, I'm going to talk about 5 different characters each between 2 of my favorite battle series through the fights they get in 2 separate story sections, the Hueco Mundo portion of the Arrancar arc, and the Enies lobby half of Water 7. These 2 parts are around the halfway marks of their respective stories, give or take 100 or 200 chapters. They have many fights with a ton of principal cast members, and weirdly enough they both have antagonist groups represented with animal motifs, each having different symbolic reasons for doing so. Now, I'm going to go character by character, framing the fight in the context of their entire arc and spoiling as far as I need to, so consider yourself warned. To start off with Frankie, our boy central to Water 7, his backstory is heavily based in his grief. The weapons made by his own hands resulted in wounds marring those he loved most of all. Attempting to absolve himself, he denied responsibility, to which Tom took offense. Those ships are like children, and a parent should never abandon their child. So, one way Frankie took this personal responsibility onto himself was through the 36th iteration of the Battle Frankie series, in which he made himself into a weapon, one that could not be appropriated by others. Contrasting this bodily autonomy is Fukuro, part of an organization that's sole purpose is to maintain secrecy through subterfuge and assassination. His biological capacity to literally zip his lip is wasted as he casually unzips, spilling classified information that necessitates the slaughter of innocents to maintain their secrecy. Loose lips sink ships, and also ruin your own stealth technique as we see this trait factoring into the fight. Frankie the Responsible is set against the Irresponsible, here and again in Dressrosa where he battles Senor Pink, who lied to and abandoned the family he loved for his devotion to Doflamingo, bearing the symbol of his negligence on his body in repentance. Fighting with the avocation of his personal responsibility, Frankie brings both of these foes down handily as the handyman he is. With Nami in his grasp, Kumadori recites a poem, expressing that the cold winter wind will mark Nami's death and herald in spring, the bright red bloom of her blood a symbol of his compassion. He bestows upon her a message for his mother, who he believes she'll see when she passes on. In his compassion, he reveals a twisted heart that makes him a perfect fit as an assassin. Yet that heart he fails to evoke is, in its true essence, at the core of Chopper, whose compassion extends to all he can reach as he saves Nami, countering Kumadori's cold winter winds with a spring bloom spawning from the cold of Drum Island. Kumadori sees death as part of the road to future life, where Chopper treasures the life of the present, finding a way to weather winters rather than simply freeze under the cold in hopes of a distant spring. But while compassion is necessary for a true doctor, in battle it can be an anathema. Chopper highlights that carnivorous zones heighten the user's ferocity, making them more efficient for combat. Chopper's omnivorous human zone has no such trait, and Kumadori isn't a devil fruit user, but his proclivity for violence is something he matches in his comrades. Chopper, a monster trying to be human, meets his match in a human who achieves something monstrous in his training. His place on Cypherpole 9's Doriki scale is already enough to set him as a superhuman, a monster beyond man, but his bizarre life return allows him to control his entire body down to his hair follicles, the absurd power even further separating him from any idea of typical humanity. Chopper's arc in the fight is marked by his lack of control, as his artificial rumble balls lead to him losing grip on his transformation, culminating in his monster point. Fighting against an inhuman beast in his own right, Chopper surpasses him by becoming even more of a monster, the abyss of his own soul allowing him to defeat Kumadori above the abyss that Enies lobby rests over. It's not a victory, as Chopper fails to achieve his vision of who he wants to be, putting aside his humanity to become the monster he rejects as part of himself. Born to a family that didn't value him for his failure to live up to his blood, Raised in an environment that shaped who he was as a person, toxic masculinity and all, Sanji's 2 battles in Enies lobby serve as a mean to touch on that upbringing and his biases. Against Khalifa, he's unable to strike a woman, ultimately failing to get the key Robin might need and letting himself suffer unneeded damage and waste time in the process. This lack is made up for by Nami, who admits to admiring his integrity and steps up to fight Khalifa, freeing Sanji from his soapy prison in the process by accident. This is later contrasted with Black Maria, where Sanji calls on Robin purposefully, allowing him to maintain his personal integrity that makes up who he is as a person, while allowing Black Maria to be dealt with by Brook and Robin as he spends his time and energy on other endeavors like his battle against Queen. Against Jabra, a deceptive wolf, Sanji's bias becomes a strength, where he's willing to give a woman the benefit of the doubt, accepting their tricks and lies at risk to himself. He gives no such concession to Jabra. When Jabra pretends to bow out of the fight, Sanji's not the one who strikes first. He does give Jabra the chance, but it's he who squanders it. Taking on the mantle of the devil, he fulfills his words to Usopp, doing what only he can do as the hunter he proclaims himself to be. In his path of the sword, Zora's identity as a swordsman is something he holds himself to from the beginning, threatening Luffy with harakiri should his role as a pirate get in the way of that dream. Kaku, on the other hand, is beholden to the world government as an assassin. Practicing the sword and having spent the last 5 years as a carpenter, his conflict is in his relative lack of identity. His time amongst Galila was valuable to him, a part of himself still having camaraderie and longing to be a carpenter even though his role as an assassin has only left destruction in his wake. His sword style is something he makes inseparable from his technique as an assassin. His muddled identity is further exacerbated by his new form as a giraffe, his fighting style chaotic and lacking in control as if to match his existential struggle. Zoro too is a man of many identities, yet they don't conflict with each other, at least not in the context of this fight. As a Straw Hat, having comrades to protect allowed him to find new strength in his battle against Mr. One, realizing that the ability to cut anything is much less important than having the ability to cut what you need to cut. And his new identity, that of Ashura, is all too fitting for Zoro's role as he battles the world government. Named for anti-gods of Buddhist myth, the Ashura might be driven by envy or insecurity, wrath, pride, boastfulness, and having a disposition for battle. The Ashura being a reflection of who Zoro is rather than something entirely new that he has to incorporate into himself. Well, after this point, his identity as a Straw Hat and his desire to become the strongest swordsman would find friction between them. Against Kaku, that he knows who he is in the moment is all he needs to surpass the one who doesn't know himself at all.
誰らの若頭から伝言だ。てめえら首だそうだ。
ハウリか。そうか、困ったわい。殺し屋という仕事は潰しが効かんというのに。
As long as losing his friends gives him pain worse than being hurt, to shave away his very lifespan to protect them is a choice Luffy makes without hesitation. Lucci, conversely, has no attachment to his comrades, merely an enjoyment of battle he seeks to fulfill by accomplishing his missions. This makes their inverse relationship rather ironic. Lucci may be the representative of the world's justice, but Luffy's clash is the result of his own sense of justice, one uncompromising. When Luffy acts, it's with a decisive goal, a clear opponent, and a blatant affront to his personal system of values. Lucci's justice is merely what he's told, yet he will gladly set it aside if it means there's more for him in the end. Rather than capture or kill Chimney and Gonbei, he lets them go, allowing them to later save Luffy. The fallout of this is the absolute loss of the Enies Lobby conflict for the government, but his gains, a wild and exciting battle, must have been too tantalizing for Lucci in the moment. Lucci is willing to go back on his justice for enjoyment, but Luffy is making compromises in his enjoyment for the sake of his justice that might protect his friends. Up until now, so much of Luffy's fighting style has been characterized by his joy and laughter, fun techniques, funny outcomes, fun fights, but the world is a wall, and to bash through it, Luffy had to change the shape of his fists. Crocodile was the first foe to fight a serious Luffy for more than a short exchange, but Lucci not only met that serious Luffy head-on, but beat him down. It's only because Luffy has comrades who he needs to protect that he's able to push past the pain he puts his own body through that allows him to defeat Lucci, whose fleeting joy can only offer so much drive. It would be years until he would be able to reconcile his sense of justice, his desire to protect, and his ability to find fun in fighting, but to surpass Lucci, his drive to protect and his will to sacrifice was more than enough. Chiruchi, an Arrancar extolling the idea of beauty, ultimately cuts hers away for more power. Though this fight is rather small in the context of Uryu's arc, this idea of cutting things away is a rather interesting way to frame much of his character. Against Mayuri, for example, he gained a fleeting power by cutting what he had away, aiming to win by whatever means necessary. Haschwalth, the balance to his antithesis, cut away his bond with Baz B to fulfill their goal of defeating Yhwach. Yhwach himself regularly culls through his followers, cutting away the unworthy and deeming them unfit to exist in the world he will build following the end of Soul Society. Uryu's mother being among those shed like cut hair or clipped nails. Believing his father to have no value in his mother as he dissected her corpse, Uryu separated himself from his father as much as possible out of that childish misunderstanding. But cutting away things isn't a strength. True strength is to hold on to your beliefs and that which you value. Taking full pride in his heritage as a Quincy, even as he fights alongside the Soul Reapers he takes issue with, he aims to hold on to his comrades by fighting with them and to save them, and holds on to his Quincy heritage most of all. His role in the Blood War is defined by his desire to hold on to everything, his heritage as a Quincy alongside his connections and bonds as a person. Drawing a blade against Chiruchi, he appears to be throwing away his heritage as he conforms to the Soul Reapers, using their weapon, but as he stresses, Quincy's only use the bow, and that still holds true. Chiruchi gave up her feathers, her aesthetic, her beauty, out of fear. Not wanting to die, she fought to live and conquer. But Uryu finds the strength in his figurative feathers, his Quincy abilities allowing him to take the energy shed by his foe to keep her wings clipped. Afraid of the pain that comes with loss, Rukia spent much of her life running away from that which she loves so it doesn't come to hurt her. She separated herself from Renji to enter the Kuchigi clan. To protect Ichigo, she plays the bad guy, allowing herself to be executed if it means they can live. Running from her guilt and her role in the death of Cayenne, she risks abandoning the heart he left her out of shame at her failure and cowardice. Ichigo did what none had before, responding to Rukia running away by daring to chase after her, risk be damned, and that courage gave her a new lease on life, one that led to her facing an echo of the past she fled from. Taking Cayenne's form, through his corruption of her memory, her heart with him, she was able to face that demon and in turn, her past. Walking with her suffering, she came to overcome it, while Araniero, a being of darkness not fit for Aizen's world of light, made that concession because he believed Aizen would remove his suffering. One who self-actualized for the bonds they made, one split into two who connected with none in his endless consumption of memories and souls, yet fulfilled nothing. Both possessing the memory of Cayenne, only one carried his heart. An amalgamation of human, Soul Reaper, Hollow, and Quincy. To best find his means of power he needs to protect his friends and shatter fate, he must understand himself. And his general path to this understanding is through those who oppose him. Powerful foes who force him to draw out his own power, that gained by his self-understanding. For understanding his foes, he perceives a lens with which to reflect on himself. Grimjaw, for the sake of his comrades, had to be the strongest, to carry on their wills and accomplish what they could not. To lose was to give up his life, his identity, and the heart that had formed in the desert of Hueco Mundo. His aspect of death, destruction, was both his joy and his fear. To conquer those who opposed him necessitated flirting with death, and should he suffer that absolute defeat, it would be all over. Two fighters face off, neither of them able to accept defeat. Yet Ichigo, bolstered by the one he tries to protect, acts through flawed efforts. Those eyes consumed by his enjoyment of battle fail to reflect Orihime. He is not so consumed as to give in to his darker humanity. Where Dordoni believes that he should give up on his sweet sentiments, Ichigo reasons to Grimjaw that it's more fun to fight again and again, justifying why it doesn't give Grimjaw the destruction he expects upon defeat. Those who Ichigo defeats become allies. where those Grimjaw defeats merely prolong his burden. Ichigo walks away from the conflict better understanding his own joy and the fun he finds in the brutality of battle, even one so serious that threatens Orihime before and after. And Grimjaw sees that his way was not the only way. His contradiction, a focus on Ichigo despite the presence of stronger enemies and allies alike, becomes a truth as he accepts Ichigo's, seeking the fun that might come from that repeated battle. Of high nobility, Byakuya's position is something of a burden. His younger self, briefly shown as brash and human, is a faded echo, the widower who watched Asana die having become the picture of his class in the wake of his transgression. With that rank comes a stoic demeanor, a love shown through collective contributions rather than individual affections, and a power befitting his position. Ichigo's incursion into Soul Society forced him to reconsider his stance. Renji's change through Ichigo allowed his fangs to reach him, Byakuya breaking yet another promise as he recognizes a strength in Renji he hadn't seen before. And that day's second new Bankai contributes to breaking down his walls even further, as Ichigo's sense of justice forces him to reconsider his. Zamari too values class and rank, seeing Byakuya as a sort of equal. Espada to Soul Reaper Captain. What he rejects is the notion that Soul Reapers are above Arrancar, as they place themselves as such in their convenient tradition and power structure as exterminators of hollows. But Byakuya, going against the orders of Soul Society to go to Hueco Mundo, is not fighting as a captain of Squad 8, but merely the older brother of Kuchiki Rukia. The symbol of his captainhood is one of the first casualties of the battle, but it's an easy exchange to make for Rukia's life. That freedom allows him to surpass Zamari, even allowing his own body to be cut if it means winning, citing that Zamari's control, the rank he aspires to fulfill, means nothing to him. He breaks his perfect image of the ideal noble he once worked so hard to uphold, where Zamari dies evoking the name of the one who gave him the touted position of Espada he defines himself by, trapped and controlled by the ideas conceived of by others in spite of his powers. Mayuri battles Uryu ascertained of his knowledge and perfection regarding the capabilities of the Quincy's, only to be surpassed by a technique Ryuken developed in his lifetime, a means for the Quincy to tap into their bloodline's power without being beholden to Yuabaha, well after the conflicts against the Quincy's centuries ago. In the wake of that defeat, he battles an Arrancar obsessed with his own perfection, framed as the deified figure of Christianity, drawing from the concept of the immortal phoenix. Mayuri, modeled after Baphomet, remains one of the most morally reprehensible characters in the manga, and yet this devil points away from Uryu and Renji, Sailapuro coming to represent Mayuri's past that he rejects. Having come to understand science as an ongoing process, he shows Sailapuro the error of his ways, forcing the ultimate stagnance on the ultimate being ensured of his perfection. So perfect, he stays in the exact state, time stretching on infinitely until he begs for the death Mayuri gladly grants him. Now, with everything on the table, we can observe what each arc does in its own right and how these fights contribute to the whole. Enies' lobby is largely about power. The world government boasts military might beyond anything the Straw Hats had yet faced, Spandam wielding it about without finesse. Fukuro assigns power levels to his allies based on their physical power. The animal theme highlights their predilection towards raw might over anything else, a motif that would echo to the future with the Animal Kingdom pirates. Yet through their encounters with the Straw Hats, it's shown that raw power isn't everything. Frankie's wild fluctuations through cola fuel and other techniques allowing him to surpass the limits of his raw fists, which proved to continually throw Fukuro off. Chopper's Monster Point gives him great strength far beyond his normal limits at the cost of his humanity. Nami defeats Khalifa through smarts rather than physical strength. Oda highlights that Devil Jambe doesn't burn Sanji because his soul is burning much hotter, highlighting the strength of his character symbolized by the fire that burns Jabra. Zoro, holding to his own path as both a swordsman and a straw hat, carves through his foe whose power is split by his identities. Luffy's strength alone isn't able to push through Lucci. He can only win because he has his friends to protect. And perhaps offering one of the greatest contributions to the arc, Usopp utterly fails to defeat Jabra with power alone. He's not a powerful hero, he's Usopp, a brilliant sniper and trickster. Because overpowering Cypher Pole isn't his forte, because his brain is better than his brawn, He's able to protect Robin in the 11th hour and supply her with the necessary keys to allow her freedom. Spandam too is weak, but so is his spirit, his strength of character. His actions are largely a detriment to his side. The Buster Call puts everyone at risk, and his torment given to Robin slows him down just enough for Usopp to find his footing atop the very Tower of Justice Spandam sought to hold over his foes before it would crumble for their lack of unity in the face of the Straw Hats' camaraderie. In Hueco Mundo, the animal theme of the Arrancar is meant to highlight power, but in a different capacity. Their animalistic thinking is simple as they are a fledgling humanity given structure and society by Aizen. They hold ideals untested and unrefined by experience in the world at large outside of their home. In their battles against the Soul Reapers and allies, these animals, stuck in a largely unchanging desert, are matched by those who surpass their ideals through the growth they'd experienced from the start of the series. Uryu kept everything at arm's length, finding strength not in cutting away but by embracing that which he valued and what he gave meaning to, while Chiruchi gave her beauty value only to discard that which she assigned meaning when convenient to her. Rukia, who found warmth in Cayenne, faces her suffering head-on and meets it, while Aroniero, preferring the cold darkness to Aizen's sun, was unable to find a heart in the countless souls making up his Gillian form and all the memories he acquired for power rather than understanding. Ichigo, still in the process of reconciling his love of fighting with his desire to protect others, having overcome more than a few failures, shows Grimjo that defeat doesn't have to mean destruction. Zomari, finding comfort in the rank of Espada given to him by Aizen, falls apart in desperation at the end, clinging to what he was given where Byakuya protects that which he is blessed to have. Freed from the shackles of his class by Ichigo, Mayuri, once a victim to stagnancy, cleanly progresses past the shadow of his prior self. Both series have the same thematic structure. Each arc has its own concepts that run through so much of it, while each character has their own ideas that recur across their respective stories. Yet, even so, I think they do so with different aims in mind. In One Piece, each character has their own individual dream or ambition, even while their path is the same as they journey across the Grand Line with their friends in the Straw Hats. The arc themes serve as this collaborative journey for the Straw Hats as a whole, with the character themes framing their individual journeys. In Bleach, the Buddhist ideas lend themselves to the journey of personal understanding we see throughout the many fights, these character themes serving as those roots of self-betterment and understanding. It's through that understanding that they exist in the world at large, changing it slowly through changing themselves, best represented by Ichigo's journey that echoes the shifting landscape of Soul Society and Hueco Mundo through his actions. And this is only part of these respective stories. Gaps left so that I might invite you to add to this reading through other arcs like Wano's take on identity or the Thousand Year Blood War's passing of the torch, or even consider other stories and how they might use different flavors of thematic exploration in their expansive journeys. Some people say less is more, but I truly do find long-form stories so profoundly interesting. Less can be more, but sometimes more is more. This kind of interlaced thematic structure is something only really possible in a long-form work that's able to dedicate the time it does to a large cast of characters in these long series of arcs to express both individualism and interdependence in these multifaceted worlds. Single movies or miniseries or novels can be plenty dense and interesting in their own right, but I love these long-ass series that always have more to delve into and uncover and appreciate. This video wasn't meant to be comprehensive, but more just laying out the idea that I've had in mind for a while, that can then be applied to other works. The MCU is the first Western example that comes to mind when it comes to this balancing act of individual themes and collective themes, but maybe that'll come another day. In the meantime, I got a new job, so that means less time to work on videos, but your support is still very much appreciated. So give that a look if you're interested. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.